When the flesh lies and the spirit reveals the truth, there is a war taking place within every human being, a quiet, invisible, and constant battle between the flesh and the spirit. It is the tension between what is temporary and what is eternal, between illusion and truth, between what pleases the body and what fulfills the soul. The flesh lies to us every day. It promises satisfaction but delivers emptiness. It offers comfort but robs us of peace. The Spirit, however, speaks softly and patiently. It calls us toward light, integrity, and truth. But hearing it requires silence, humility, and surrender. The world encourages us to follow our impulses, to trust our emotions, to chase pleasure and comfort at any cost. Yet the deeper voice within, the voice of the Spirit, calls us to pause, to discern, to see beyond appearances. It is the whisper that says, "Not everything that feels good is right. Not everything that looks true is real." The Spirit sees what the flesh cannot. It reveals what the flesh hides. In this reflection, we will explore the profound conflict between the deceiving nature of the flesh and the revealing power of the Spirit. Through the following 5 sections, we will uncover how the flesh manipulates perception, how the Spirit unveils divine truth, how discernment becomes the key to freedom, how temptation can be transformed into wisdom, and how, ultimately, living by the Spirit brings lasting peace. Let us begin this journey inward, where truth is not found in noise or desire, but in the quiet conviction of the soul. The illusions of the flesh and the deception of desire. The flesh operates through illusion. It feeds on immediate gratification, whispering promises of fulfillment that never last. It says, "If you just have this, you will be satisfied." It seduces the mind into believing that comfort is peace, that abundance is purpose, that pleasure is meaning. But each of these promises fades into disappointment, leaving behind the taste of emptiness. The flesh is not merely physical. It represents the part of human nature that resists truth. It seeks to justify sin, rationalize weakness, and distort perception. The flesh lies because it is bound to the temporary world. It cannot see beyond what is visible, and therefore it worships appearance over essence. When we live according to the flesh, we begin to measure value by how things look, not by what they are. We chase validation rather than virtue, applause rather than authenticity. Desire itself is not evil. It is misdirection that corrupts it. The flesh takes a pure longing and bends it into obsession. It transforms love into lust, need into greed, rest into laziness, and confidence into pride. It uses the same energy that could elevate the spirit to enslave the heart. The lie of the flesh is that satisfaction can be achieved through possession, but spiritual truth teaches the opposite. The more you possess, the emptier you become when you are disconnected from God. The great spiritual teachers, from the prophets to the apostles, warned that the flesh blinds the eyes of the soul. It causes confusion because it interprets life through emotion instead of revelation. The flesh sees what it wants to see and believes what it wishes were true. It has no patience for the process of spiritual growth. It demands results now, answers now, pleasure now. And because of this impatience, the flesh falls easily into traps set by darkness, those moments where the temporary seems more appealing than the eternal. The Spirit, however, waits. It discerns. It knows that what glitters is not always gold. The flesh judges by surface. The Spirit judges by substance. The flesh wants comfort. The Spirit wants truth, and these two desires cannot coexist peacefully. They pull the soul in opposite directions. The Apostle Paul described this inner tension when he said, "The flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh." When the flesh lies, it does so with subtlety. It does not always tempt through obvious sin, but through distraction. It makes us busy with what does not matter, so we lose sight of what truly does. It fills our minds with noise, our schedules with chaos, our hearts with comparison. The greatest deception of the flesh is not only in the sins we commit, but in the truths we ignore. It teaches us to chase the shadows of life while the light stands patiently behind us. To awaken from the illusions of the flesh, we must learn to pause before reacting, to question every impulse that promises instant relief. We must ask, is this what my soul needs, or what my weakness desires? Only then can we begin to separate truth from deception, for the flesh may shout, but the Spirit whispers, and the whisper is always closer to truth. When a person finally sees through the deception of the flesh, a profound freedom begins. The chains of impulse break, the fog of confusion clears, and the soul begins to see with spiritual clarity. You realize that the promises of the flesh were never about satisfaction. They were distractions to keep you away from divine purpose. And so, the first step towards spiritual revelation is simple, yet difficult. Silence the noise of desire long enough to hear the voice of the Spirit. Do not let the temporary dictate your eternal direction. If this message has touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and stay with us on this journey of truth and awakening. Your growth in the Spirit begins with awareness, and together we walk this path toward light. When the Spirit reveals what the flesh tries to hide, the Spirit sees what the eyes of the flesh cannot. It perceives truth not through sight, but through revelation, not through intellect, but through discernment. The flesh is a master of disguise, crafting illusions that appear good but conceal decay. It teaches us to chase validation, to cover our insecurities with success, to numb our pain with distraction. Yet the Spirit, like light piercing a veil, exposes what lies beneath those coverings. It reveals what is real, what is divine, what is eternal. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the mask of the flesh begins to crack. Perhaps it happens after betrayal, loss, or failure, moments when our human strength collapses and the false foundations we've built can no longer hold us. In those moments, the Spirit begins to whisper, "Now you see." What the flesh once celebrated as victory is shown to be vanity. What it once called love is unmasked as attachment. What it once called freedom is exposed as bondage. The revelation is painful but necessary. Only through seeing the lie can one begin to live in truth. When the Spirit reveals, it does not merely inform, it transforms. Revelation is not intellectual, it is experiential. It opens the heart to divine clarity, exposing both our wounds and our worth. The flesh hides pain because it fears vulnerability, but the Spirit reveals it because healing can only occur in the light. The flesh says, "Hide what hurts." The Spirit says, "Bring it before God." The flesh fears exposure, the Spirit finds liberation in it. Truth always disrupts comfort. When the Spirit speaks, it shakes the soul from complacency. It may show you that the relationships you thought were sacred are actually chains, that the goals you've pursued are driven by ego, or that the comfort you idolize is stunting your growth. The Spirit is not cruel, it is merciful. But mercy sometimes comes in the form of disruption. God's revelations are rarely soft. They are earthquakes that destroy false structures so that truth can rise. The flesh hates revelation because it thrives in darkness. As long as you remain blind, you remain bound. That is why spiritual awakening often feels like conflict. It is the death of illusion. The Spirit begins to reveal not only the lies of the world, but the lies you have told yourself. I'm fine. I don't need help. I can do this on my own. I know what's best for me. Each of these is a wall built by the flesh to resist surrender. And when the Spirit begins to break those walls, it feels like loss, but it is actually rebirth. In truth, revelation is God's greatest act of love. When He allows your illusions to collapse, it is not punishment, but purification. He is not taking something from you. He is freeing you from what was never real. Many people pray for clarity, yet resist the pain that comes with it. To see truth means to let go of falsehood, and the flesh does not surrender easily. The Spirit's revelation often comes through stillness. It rarely shouts. It does not compete with the noise of the world. It waits for you to be quiet enough to hear. That is why solitude, prayer, and reflection are essential. In silence, the voice of truth becomes distinct. The flesh fills every moment with distraction, so you never have to face yourself. The Spirit empties that noise, so you finally can. To walk in revelation, one must learn the sacred art of listening. But revelation also comes through suffering. Pain exposes attachments. When you lose what you thought you needed, you learn what truly sustains you. The Spirit reveals in tears what joy cannot teach. Through heartbreak, betrayal, disappointment, and delay, the illusions of the flesh are dismantled piece by piece. You discover that you were never in control, that strength without humility is weakness, that independence without faith is isolation. Pain becomes a teacher, and the Spirit becomes the interpreter. Every truth the Spirit reveals replaces one lie the flesh told. The flesh says, "You are what you do." The Spirit says, "You are who you are in God." The flesh says, "You must control everything." The Spirit says, "You were never meant to." The flesh says, "You are alone." The Spirit whispers, "You were never abandoned." Every revelation reorders perception, shifting the focus from self-preservation to divine alignment. The flesh's favorite hiding place is religion without relationship. Performance without transformation. It loves to appear holy while remaining hollow. It prays loudly, but listens rarely. It serves to be seen, gives to be praised, and obeys to be rewarded. Yet the Spirit reveals the motives behind every act. It shines a light on intention, reminding the soul that God does not see as man sees. He judges the heart. The flesh may deceive others, but the Spirit cannot deceive itself. When truth enters, it burns away the excess. It simplifies life. Suddenly, what mattered no longer does. The Spirit reveals that you do not need as much as you thought, that peace is not found in accumulation but in surrender. You begin to recognize that happiness built on the flesh is fragile because it depends on circumstance. But joy born of the Spirit is unshakable because it depends on truth. To walk in revelation means to live in alignment with what is eternal. It means choosing integrity when deceit seems easier, choosing silence when noise seeks validation, choosing humility when pride demands recognition. The Spirit reveals that every act, thought, and word either draws you closer to light or deeper into illusion. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Truth becomes the standard by which you measure everything. But with revelation comes responsibility. Once the Spirit shows you what the flesh hides, you must decide whether to act on that truth. Knowledge without obedience becomes another form of deception. The flesh can even use revelation as pride. Look how much I know. The Spirit says, now live what you know. The true measure of revelation is transformation. If your life does not change, you have only observed the truth. You have not yet become it. Sometimes the Spirit reveals uncomfortable truths about people around you. It shows you hidden intentions, unspoken deceit, silent envy. This discernment is not given for judgment, but for protection and wisdom. When God opens your eyes, it is not to condemn others, but to call you to purity. The flesh will use revelation to boast, saying, I see what others cannot. The Spirit remains humble, aware that seeing truth is not a privilege, it is a responsibility. There are also times when the Spirit reveals truths about yourself that you do not want to face. It shows the pride you hide under humility, the bitterness you disguise as righteousness, the fear that masquerades as caution. These are difficult revelations, but they are sacred. They strip away the false self so that the authentic one may emerge. Every confrontation with truth is a step toward freedom. The flesh cannot stand in the light for long. Once exposed, its illusions lose power. The more you walk in revelation, the less control temptation has over you. Lies only thrive in secrecy. When truth is spoken, they die. This is why confession, honesty, and humility are central to spiritual growth. When you bring your darkness into the light, it loses its authority. In time, you begin to see that revelation is not a single moment, but a lifelong unfolding. The Spirit reveals in layers, not all at once, because too much truth too quickly would break you. God reveals according to your capacity to understand. As you mature, your vision sharpens. You begin to discern the difference between what appears good and what is truly divine, between what is urgent and what is important, between movement and purpose. Ultimately, the Spirit reveals that truth is not a concept, it is a person. It is the presence of God Himself dwelling within you. To walk in truth is to walk with Him. And to walk with Him is to be continually exposed, continually refined, continually renewed. The flesh lies to keep you comfortable. The Spirit reveals to make you whole. Revelation brings freedom, but freedom requires courage. The courage to leave behind the familiar, to confront the uncomfortable, to choose obedience when convenience tempts you otherwise. Every time you choose truth over illusion, you die a little to the flesh and live more in the Spirit. This dying is not defeat, it is resurrection in process. When the Spirit reveals, gratitude replaces fear. You no longer dread what may be exposed, because you understand that every revelation is an act of divine mercy. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" The flesh sees loss. The Spirit sees liberation. The flesh mourns what ends. The Spirit rejoices for what begins. The world may not understand this journey. Those still blinded by the flesh will call you detached, too spiritual, too introspective. But revelation separates you for purpose. It is impossible to live by the Spirit and still fit comfortably into the patterns of the world. You were not called to conform. You were called to transform. The more the Spirit reveals, the less the world satisfies. In the end, revelation leads you to peace, not because life becomes easier, but because illusion loses its power over you. You no longer panic when things fall apart. You understand that truth is always being revealed, even through chaos. The Spirit teaches you to trust that every loss uncovers a deeper gain. Every ending conceals a beginning. Every exposure is a divine invitation to grow. And so, when the flesh lies and the Spirit reveals, you stand at a crossroads between comfort and clarity. Choose clarity. Choose light. Choose truth, even when it hurts. For everything the Spirit exposes is meant to heal, and everything the flesh hides is meant to harm. The one who lives by revelation walks not in confusion but in purpose, not in fear but in faith. If this truth resonates with you, if the Spirit within you feels stirred by these words, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and stay connected. Each message here is meant to help you walk more fully in truth, more deeply in faith, and more clearly in the light that sets the soul free. The battle between the seen and the unseen. The struggle between flesh and spirit is not just a metaphor, it is the central drama of human existence. The flesh binds us to what we can see, touch, and measure, while the Spirit invites us to trust in what cannot be seen, but is far more real. The flesh lives by the eyes, the Spirit lives by faith. One seeks proof, the other lives by conviction. And so life becomes a field of tension between two worlds, the material and the divine, the visible and the invisible. The flesh insists that only what is tangible exists. It demands evidence before belief, results before faith, outcomes before surrender. It teaches us to depend on sight rather than insight, on logic rather than revelation. But the Spirit operates by a different law. It understands that the greatest truths are not seen but sensed, not proven but perceived. Faith, as the ancient words declare, is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The Spirit does not deny reason, it transcends it. It knows that reality extends beyond the five senses, and that truth often hides in what the eyes overlook. To live according to the flesh is to confine yourself to the limits of the physical world. It is to build your life around appearances, status, wealth, recognition, pleasure. Yet everything seen is temporary, everything tangible fades. The Spirit, however, roots itself in what is eternal. It knows that unseen foundations are stronger than visible structures. When storms come, and they always do, the house built on sand collapses, but the one founded on Spirit stands firm. The great challenge for every soul is that the seen world feels louder, closer, more persuasive. The Spirit requires patience and stillness, but the flesh demands action and immediacy. The unseen requires trust, the seen offers illusionary control. This is why surrender feels unnatural to the ego. It requires releasing what can be held, to embrace what cannot be grasped. It means believing that God's timing, invisible and mysterious, is better than the deadlines we create for ourselves. The flesh will always tempt you with visible proofs of success. It measures worth by numbers, applause, and possession. It says, "You are as valuable as others perceive you to be." But the Spirit whispers a deeper truth. You are valuable because you are. The Spirit knows that the true measure of a person lies not in how they appear, but in what sustains them when appearances crumble. The Spirit defines success as peace, integrity, and alignment with divine will, none of which can be seen by the human eye, but all of which can be felt by the awakened heart. When the flesh governs your life, you become addicted to outcomes. Every disappointment feels like failure, every delay like rejection. The unseen realm of Spirit, however, teaches that delay is preparation, that rejection is protection, and that what is unseen is often the work of divine order, rearranging what must shift before your blessing arrives. The Spirit teaches you to see meaning in waiting and wisdom in loss. It reveals that life is not happening against you, but through you. But the flesh fears this unseen order because it cannot control it. The ego panics when it cannot predict, manipulate, or explain. It wants certainty in a world designed to teach faith, and so it resists surrender, clinging to plans that no longer serve, relationships that drain, and habits that destroy. The Spirit, in contrast, teaches release. It invites you to let go so that the divine can move freely. Where the flesh demands control, the Spirit practices trust. It is often through loss that the Spirit gains ground. When something is stripped away, it is not always punishment. It is often revelation. The unseen hand of God removes what blocks the flow of your purpose. But because the flesh cannot see the full picture, it interprets every loss as tragedy. The Spirit, however, knows that pruning is preparation. The tree must be cut back to grow stronger. The soil must be turned before it can yield fruit. The unseen works quietly beneath the surface, while the flesh grieves what it can no longer touch. To live by the Spirit is to live by inner sight. It is to understand that everything physical mirrors something spiritual. Every conflict outside reflects one within. Every victory in the unseen precedes one in the visible. The flesh fights battles with strength and strategy. The Spirit fights with surrender, prayer, and faith. The unseen victories are the ones that truly matter. When peace replaces panic, when forgiveness replaces bitterness, when faith remains steady amid chaos, these are triumphs the world cannot measure, but heaven celebrates. The unseen realm is also where truth is formed. Before a word is spoken or a thought manifests, it exists first in spirit. That is why guarding the inner life is essential. The flesh focuses on behavior, the Spirit focuses on being. Transformation begins within long before it becomes visible. You cannot change your world until you allow God to change your heart. The unseen is the birthplace of all reality. Those who walk by the Spirit often appear foolish to those ruled by flesh. The world mocks what it does not understand. It cannot comprehend faith that persists without evidence, love that forgives without apology, or peace that endures without explanation. Yet it is precisely this unseen strength that sustains the faithful. The flesh sees weakness, the Spirit knows it as surrender. The flesh sees risk, the Spirit knows it as trust. The flesh sees loss. The Spirit knows it as seed. Every unseen act of faith plants something that will one day bloom in time. When the Spirit begins to lead, perception changes. You no longer judge situations by appearances. You learn that things are not always as they seem, that sometimes blessings come disguised as burdens, and breakthroughs come wrapped in trials. The unseen is filled with divine paradox. To the flesh, suffering seems meaningless. To the Spirit, it is often sacred preparation. To the flesh, waiting feels like stagnation. To the Spirit, it is cultivation. To the flesh, death is an ending. To the Spirit, it is transformation. Faith becomes the bridge between these two realms. It allows you to move beyond what your senses report to what your soul knows. Faith does not deny reality. It transcends it. It teaches you to hold both, the seen and the unseen, without letting the temporary distort the eternal. It is a discipline of perspective, a continual choice to trust what God is doing in the unseen, even when the visible world looks contrary. The flesh craves certainty because it fears vulnerability. It needs guarantees before it moves. But the Spirit understands that faith grows in uncertainty. The unknown is not a void. It is a sacred space where divine possibilities are born. The Spirit invites you to walk blindfolded into that mystery, trusting that each step you take in faith reveals what was previously hidden. The battle between the seen and the unseen is fought daily in small decisions. When you choose peace over panic, patience over haste, obedience over pride, you are siding with the Spirit. Each time you silence the urge to defend yourself, to retaliate, to prove your worth, you weaken the flesh's grip. The unseen victories accumulate quietly. Over time, they transform your character until the old patterns lose their hold and the inner voice of the Spirit becomes the dominant guide. In truth, the unseen world is more stable than the visible one. Everything physical will pass away, but what is spiritual endures. The body ages, possessions decay, achievements fade, but the soul grows stronger, wiser, freer. The more you align with the unseen, the less fear you have of losing what is seen. Detachment becomes not indifference but liberation. The ability to love without clinging, to give without expecting, to walk through darkness without despair. The Spirit reveals that the seen world is a reflection, a shadow of greater reality. What happens here echoes eternity. The kindness you sow, the forgiveness you offer, the faith you hold, all reverberate beyond this moment. The unseen keeps record even when no one notices. That is why living for the unseen requires integrity. It is to live as if the invisible audience of heaven is watching even when the world looks away. And yet, this way of living requires courage. The flesh mocks invisible rewards. It says, "What's the point of being good if no one sees it?" But the Spirit replies, God sees, and that is enough. To live for unseen approval is to live for truth rather than image, for meaning rather than applause. It is to understand that eternity, not popularity, is the measure of a soul's success. There will always be tension between these two realities. You will feel it in every decision, every temptation, every act of faith. The flesh will say, "This makes no sense," while the Spirit will whisper, "This is the way." The key is learning which voice to obey. The voice of the flesh is loud, urgent, emotional. The voice of the Spirit is calm, firm, timeless. It does not argue, it simply remains. The more you dwell in stillness, the more clearly you can hear it. The unseen world is also the place of warfare. The greatest battles are not external, but internal, between faith and doubt, humility and pride, surrender and control. The flesh wants to win, the spirit wants to grow. And sometimes growth looks like losing. Sometimes victory comes through surrender, strength through brokenness, and freedom through letting go. The unseen wisdom of God often contradicts the logic of the flesh. As you mature in spirit, you begin to discern patterns in the unseen. You recognize divine timing in what once seemed random, purpose in what once felt painful, lessons in what once looked like loss. You stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is being revealed through this?" You understand that everything visible is temporary theater for unseen truths being enacted in your soul. When you embrace this, fear loses its power. You no longer need to see to believe because you have tasted the faithfulness of the unseen. You know that the same hand that guided you before will guide you again. You no longer demand signs. You trust the silence. The flesh needs miracles to believe. The spirit knows that life itself is already won. The journey between seen and unseen is the transformation of perception. The same circumstances may remain, but your vision changes. You begin to see not with eyes that judge, but with a heart that discerns. You see divine fingerprints in coincidences, sacred messages in interruptions, hidden grace in disappointments. The unseen world becomes more real than the one you can touch, because it is there that truth abides unchanging. And when you finally learn to live from this place, peace follows. Not a fragile peace that depends on comfort, but a deep peace that flows from knowing you are guided, even when you cannot see the path. You begin to rest in trust, not because everything makes sense, but because you have learned that the unseen order of God never fails. The flesh lies by insisting that what you see is all there is. The Spirit reveals that what you cannot see is infinitely greater. Every act of faith, every moment of surrender, every prayer whispered in darkness opens the door wider between the two worlds. The unseen is not distant. It is within you. It is the eternal breath that animates your mortal frame, the whisper that reminds you that you are spirit before you are flesh. So walk not by sight, but by faith. Let the unseen truth define your steps. Trust the hand that leads you through mystery. And remember, when all visible things fade, the unseen light remains guiding you home. If this message speaks to your soul and you wish to continue this journey into spiritual truth, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel. Stay with us as we explore the deep wisdom of the unseen, the reality of the Spirit, and the divine truth that brings freedom to all who seek it. When temptation tests the soul and truth becomes the weapon. Temptation is the meeting point between the lie of the flesh and the revelation of the Spirit. It is not simply about desire or weakness. It is the battlefield where your identity is questioned, your conviction is examined, and your allegiance is revealed. The flesh whispers to you that you can have both, comfort and holiness, self-will and divine will, indulgence and purity. It tells you that one small compromise will not matter, that grace will cover carelessness, that the line between right and wrong can bend to convenience. But the Spirit knows that every small decision creates spiritual direction. The path you walk is shaped not by the great moments, but by the unseen choices you make when no one is watching. Temptation is not random. It is precisely aimed at the area of your calling. The enemy never wastes effort on what does not matter. He tempts where you are gifted, challenges where you are strong, and attacks where you are growing. The flesh becomes his ally when you allow desire to speak louder than discernment. Temptation does not begin with an action, it begins with a thought. The thought becomes curiosity, curiosity becomes justification, and justification becomes bondage. The Spirit, however, exposes this process in its earliest stage. It does not wait for sin to mature. It warns you at conception. When the Spirit reveals truth, it doesn't merely show you what is wrong. It shows you why it is destructive. The flesh sees sin as forbidden fruit. The Spirit sees it as poisoned fruit. The flesh asks, "Why not?" The Spirit asks, "Why would I?" The flesh focuses on momentary pleasure. The Spirit sees eternal consequence. And the truth revealed by the Spirit becomes the only weapon strong enough to silence the lies of temptation. The first great truth the Spirit teaches in moments of temptation is that freedom is not the absence of boundaries. It is the wisdom to honor them. The flesh interprets freedom as doing whatever you please. The Spirit defines it as the ability to say no to what enslaves you. Every temptation offers false freedom, an illusion of control that leads to dependence. But when you obey the Spirit, you learn that true liberty is mastery over desire, not surrender to it. There is a sacred paradox in spiritual warfare. What the flesh calls denial, the Spirit calls discipline. The flesh says you are depriving yourself. The Spirit says you are preserving yourself. Each act of restraint strengthens your soul's authority over your impulses. Every time you refuse a lie that promises pleasure at the cost of peace, you grow stronger in truth. The flesh loses power not through suppression, but through revelation. You do not defeat temptation by willpower alone. You defeat it by seeing through it. Temptation loses its grip when you understand its purpose. It is not simply a test of morality. It is a measure of spiritual maturity. God allows temptation not to make you fall, but to reveal what still needs transformation. The Spirit uses the same battle that the flesh fears as an opportunity for refinement. Through temptation, you learn where your heart still seeks validation from the world, where your desires are still misaligned, and where your trust still wavers. Every temptation faced with truth becomes a doorway to deeper strength. The flesh, however, interprets temptation as unfair. It asks, "If God loves me, why does he let me be tempted?" But love without testing is immaturity. A muscle grows only when it is challenged. Faith grows only when it is pressured. The Spirit knows that untested conviction cannot sustain you in the storms of life. Each trial purifies your motives, stripping away the superficial so that only the sincere remains. Temptation becomes not a curse, but a mirror reflecting the battle within. The flesh wants to escape conflict. The Spirit embraces it as growth. When temptation comes, the easiest path is to numb, to distract, to justify. The Spirit, however, teaches you to face it with truth. It says, "Do not run, discern." It calls you to bring the battle into the light, to see temptation not as your enemy, but as an invitation to mastery. For the flesh tempts through secrecy, the Spirit conquers through exposure. What is hidden grows stronger, what is confessed loses power. To walk in truth means to live in transparency. The flesh lives in shadows, wearing masks of respectability. It wants to appear righteous while nurturing rebellion in private. The Spirit calls for honesty, not perfection, but integrity. The more you live in truth, the less space temptation finds in you. Darkness cannot dwell in a heart that continually welcomes light. That is why humility is your greatest defense. The proud fall easily because they believe they are beyond temptation. The humble stand because they know their need for grace. Temptation also reveals your source of strength. The flesh draws from emotion and self-confidence. The Spirit draws from dependence on God. The flesh says, "I can handle it." The Spirit says, "I cannot without him." Every time you choose humility over arrogance, you realign yourself with divine protection. Pride opens the door to deception, but surrender seals it shut. The Spirit fights not by resisting alone, but by replacing lies with truth, lust with love, pride with prayer, control with trust. It is in the wilderness of temptation that spiritual identity is forged. When Jesus was tempted, the enemy did not attack his power but his identity. If you are the Son of God, the same strategy is used against you. Temptation begins with doubt about who you are and whose you are. The flesh defines identity by performance. What you do, what you have, how others see you. The Spirit defines identity by connection, who you belong to, what truth you live by, what purpose you serve. The more secure you are in your divine identity, the less power temptation holds. You cannot be seduced by what you no longer need to prove. The Spirit reveals that temptation is often misinterpreted desire. What you crave in the flesh is often a distorted reflection of what your soul truly longs for. The desire for pleasure may conceal a longing for intimacy. The hunger for control may hide a thirst for safety. The obsession with recognition may reflect a deeper yearning to be seen by God. When you trace desire to its root, you discover that beneath every unhealthy craving is a holy need. The Spirit does not shame you for your desires. It purifies them. It teaches you to channel your hunger toward fulfillment rather than indulgence. The key to victory lies not in suppressing the flesh, but in feeding the Spirit. Starvation of truth makes temptation stronger. When your mind is empty, lies grow loud. When it is filled with revelation, lies lose appeal. The flesh tempts you to act impulsively. The Spirit teaches you to respond intentionally. The more you nourish your soul with truth through reflection, prayer, and gratitude, the less room there is for deception to take root. Temptation thrives in isolation. When the soul detaches from spiritual communion, the flesh grows louder. That is why the Spirit emphasizes connection with God, with truth, with others who walk in faith. Confession is not weakness, it is wisdom. It breaks the illusion that you must fight alone. The flesh wants secrecy. The Spirit wants fellowship. Healing flows through humility shared in truth. The greatest lie of the flesh during temptation is that giving in will bring relief. But indulgence never satisfies. It only deepens hunger. The Spirit reveals that every false pleasure carries a hidden cost. The erosion of peace, the dulling of conscience, the loss of clarity. Every time you choose the fleeting comfort of sin, you trade eternal joy for temporary escape. But every time you resist, you reclaim dominion over yourself. You prove that the flesh no longer rules your destiny. Overcoming temptation does not make you superior, it makes you surrendered. It is not about pride in purity, but peace in obedience. You stop fighting for approval and start living from identity. The Spirit reveals that holiness is not the absence of struggle, but the persistence of faith amid it. The one who endures temptation and remains standing is not the strongest, but the most anchored. Truth becomes the sword that severs deception. Every temptation is a lie about God's goodness and your worth. The flesh says, God is withholding something from you. The Spirit replies, God is protecting something within you. The flesh says, you deserve this. The Spirit says, you are made for more. The flesh says, no one will know. The Spirit says, you will know, and that is enough. When the Spirit reveals these contrasts, the choice becomes clear. Not easy, but clear. Temptation loses its seduction in the presence of revelation. When you truly see the cost of sin, the emptiness behind its glamour, the consequences behind its promises, desire dissolves. The light of truth strips temptation of its disguise. What once seemed irresistible becomes irrelevant. The Spirit teaches you to recognize patterns before they repeat, to discern manipulation before it manifests. Every moment of awareness is a victory of light over darkness. You learn to view temptation not with fear, but with discernment. It becomes a signal, not a shame, a reminder of where your flesh still needs refining and where your faith still needs strengthening. You begin to thank God even for the test, because through it your spirit grows sharper. Each temptation overcome adds weight to your character and authority to your soul. You emerge not unscarred, but undefeated. The flesh cannot comprehend the power of surrender. It believes that yielding to God means losing control, when in truth, it means gaining mastery. The more you surrender, the freer you become. The Spirit shows that temptation loses power when you no longer identify with it. You stop saying, "I am tempted," and start saying, "A temptation is passing through me." You are not your impulses. You are the awareness that chooses what to nurture and what to release. Every battle with temptation strengthens discernment. Over time, you learn to feel the difference between the vibration of truth and the tone of deception. Lies carry urgency and confusion. Truth carries peace and conviction. The more you live in alignment with truth, the quicker you recognize counterfeits. What once trapped you no longer attracts you because your spirit has evolved beyond the level of the test. And still, even in moments of weakness, grace remains. The Spirit never condemns, it convicts with compassion. When you fall, it calls you back to truth, not through fear, but through love. It says you are not defined by your failure, you are refined by your return. Every time you come back to the light, the darkness loses another piece of you. God uses even your stumbles to teach endurance, empathy, and humility. Temptation may never disappear, but its power over you can. When your spirit matures, the same tests that once defeated you become reminders of how far you've grown. You no longer panic in the face of temptation. You perceive its purpose and stand in peace. The battle shifts from resistance to revelation. You no longer fight to avoid sin. You live to embody truth. And truth is the ultimate weapon. It cuts through illusion, exposes motives, and dismantles deception. It teaches you that holiness is not about denying desire, but transforming it into devotion. The energy once wasted in struggle becomes the fuel of purpose. The very fire that once tempted you now purifies you. What the flesh meant for destruction, the Spirit turns into wisdom. When temptation visits you again, and it will, remember that the test is not about the act, but about awareness. The more aware you are of your divine nature, the less the flesh can seduce you. The truth within you becomes your shield. You begin to walk through life not as one avoiding sin, but as one embodying light. Temptation becomes powerless against a soul that knows its worth. If this message has spoken to your heart, if you recognize that your battles are not proof of failure, but opportunities for transformation, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Continue with us as we unfold deeper truths of the Spirit, where every test becomes teaching and every temptation becomes triumph. Living by the Spirit, the path to lasting peace and truth. To live by the Spirit is to live beyond appearances, beyond impulse, and beyond fear. It is to shift from reacting to responding, from controlling to surrendering, from striving to flowing. It is the gradual awakening of the soul to the reality that truth is not something we acquire. It is something we align with. Living by the Spirit is not a religious performance or a moral achievement. It is a transformation of perception. It is the moment when the noise of the flesh loses its authority and the still, calm voice of divine wisdom becomes the compass of your existence. The flesh always seeks to complicate life, to add, to accumulate, to compete. It builds layers of identity based on approval, appearance, and performance. But the Spirit simplifies. It removes everything that is false until only truth remains. The Spirit does not decorate, it purifies. It does not inflate, it grounds. To live by the Spirit, you must be willing to be emptied, because only an empty vessel can be filled with divine presence. The flesh fears emptiness because it mistakes it for loss. The Spirit embraces emptiness because it recognizes it as space for God. Peace begins when you no longer resist reality. The flesh wages war with what is. It wants to control outcomes, rewrite history, and predict the future. It believes that peace will come once everything is in order. But the Spirit knows that peace is not the absence of chaos. It is the presence of surrender. It is the deep, abiding trust that even when nothing makes sense, God's hand is still writing the story. Living by the Spirit means learning to breathe through uncertainty without needing to fix it, to rest in divine timing without demanding proof. The flesh lives in reaction. It responds to every insult, every change, every disappointment. It burns energy, fighting what cannot be changed. The Spirit, however, observes before responding. It recognizes that not every battle is yours to fight, and not every noise deserves attention. To live by the Spirit is to choose silence where the flesh would speak, patience where it would rush, forgiveness where it would retaliate. This is not weakness, it is mastery. The Spirit teaches you that strength is not the ability to control others, but the ability to control yourself. There is a deep humility in spiritual living, for it requires releasing the illusion of superiority. The flesh thrives on comparison. It must be better, faster, richer, wiser. The Spirit rejoices in unity. It recognizes the divine image in everyone. To live by the Spirit is to see yourself not as separate from others, but as part of one greater consciousness, one divine purpose expressing itself through countless forms. It is to love without condition, because you understand that what you give to another, you also give to yourself. The path of the Spirit is narrow, not because it is exclusive, but because few are willing to let go of the weight that prevents them from walking it. You cannot walk in truth while carrying pride, resentment, or fear. The flesh clings to burdens because it confuses them with identity. The Spirit releases them because it knows they were never yours to bear. Every act of forgiveness lightens your steps. Every moment of gratitude strengthens your stride. Living by the Spirit is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming free. The greatest gift of the Spirit is discernment, the ability to see beyond the surface of things. The flesh judges by appearance, the Spirit perceives intention. The flesh calls inconvenience a curse, the Spirit calls it preparation. The flesh sees enemies, the Spirit sees teachers. This shift in perspective transforms your entire experience of life. What once felt like opposition now feels like opportunity. What once provoked anger now evokes wisdom. The Spirit reveals that every event, even the painful ones, carries meaning. There are no coincidences, only lessons disguised as circumstances. But living by the Spirit does not mean life becomes effortless. It means you meet challenges with clarity rather than chaos. It means storms no longer destroy your peace, because your peace no longer depends on calm weather. You stop praying for easier days and begin praying for stronger faith. You stop asking for things to go your way and start asking to see God's way. The Spirit does not remove difficulty, it transforms your relationship with it. You begin to see that everything designed to break you was also designed to build you. The flesh lives for approval, but the Spirit lives for alignment. Approval is fleeting, alignment is eternal. The moment you stop seeking validation from others and start seeking confirmation from within, you begin to live authentically. The Spirit teaches you to trust the quiet conviction that needs no audience. It whispers, "Do what is right, not what is popular." Living by the Spirit often means walking alone for a season, misunderstood by those who cannot yet see. But solitude with God is better than company without purpose. When the Spirit leads, your life begins to align naturally with divine order. You notice that people, places, and opportunities appear not by force, but by flow. You stop chasing what is not meant for you because you trust that what is yours cannot be lost. You learn to let go without bitterness, to wait without anxiety, to serve without expecting reward. The Spirit makes you generous without calculation because you understand that abundance flows from trust, not from control. The more you give, the more you realize you are never lacking. Living by the Spirit also means living in truth, and truth is not always comfortable. The Spirit will confront you before it comforts you. It will show you the lies you've believed, the attachments you've justified, the fears you've hidden. It will dismantle every illusion until your heart beats in rhythm with honesty. This process can feel like loss, but it is liberation. When the Spirit reveals truth, it is not to shame you, but to awaken you. It breaks you open, only to heal you deeper. The flesh fears exposure. The Spirit welcomes it, because it knows that nothing can be healed in darkness. The Spirit teaches you to replace reaction with reflection. When someone hurts you, the flesh seeks revenge. The Spirit seeks understanding. It asks, "What wound in me did this pain expose?" Living by the Spirit turns conflict into a mirror and pain into a teacher. You realize that life is not happening to you but for you, that every event serves your evolution. Even rejection becomes sacred when seen through spiritual eyes. It is God's redirection in disguise. The Spirit transforms every ending into a new beginning. Living by the Spirit is not a destination, but a rhythm. It is a daily practice of awareness, a continual returning to the present moment. The flesh lives in the past or the future, replaying regrets or rehearsing fears. The Spirit lives here, now, in the stillness where God resides. It reminds you that eternity is not later. It is now. Each breath, each heartbeat, each act of kindness is a sacred encounter with the divine. The more you dwell in this awareness, the less control the world has over your peace. When you live by the Spirit, gratitude becomes your natural state. You begin to thank God not only for what is pleasant, but for what is painful, because you see purpose in both. Gratitude shifts your vibration from lack to abundance, from fear to trust. It anchors you in faith even when circumstances shift. The flesh complains because it sees only the moment. The Spirit praises because it sees the bigger picture. Gratitude is not blindness, it is vision. It is the recognition that even the storms carry seeds of blessing. The Spirit teaches simplicity. It calls you back from the excess of wanting into the sufficiency of being. The flesh always wants more. More pleasure, more power, more recognition. The Spirit whispers, "You already have everything you need." When this truth sinks in, anxiety fades. You stop measuring your worth by external achievement and begin to measure it by internal peace. You understand that the goal is not to have more, but to need less. True abundance is contentment in the present moment. To live by the Spirit is also to walk in love. Not sentimental love, but divine love that sees the sacred in all things. The flesh loves conditionally. The Spirit loves as an act of understanding. It sees pain in others, not as offense, but as reflection of their own struggle. The Spirit teaches compassion that does not enable weakness, but awakens strength. You learn to respond to hatred with wisdom, to ignorance with patience, to cruelty with silence. You love not because people deserve it, but because love itself is freedom. When you live by the Spirit, fear gradually dissolves. You no longer fear loss because you understand that nothing real can be taken from you. You no longer fear death because you realize it is only a transition into greater light. You no longer fear rejection because your worth is anchored in something unshakable. The Spirit reveals that fear is simply faith misplaced, faith in the power of darkness instead of the sovereignty of God. The moment you reclaim your faith, fear loses its foundation. The Spirit also teaches detachment, not indifference, but inner independence. You learn to participate in the world without becoming enslaved by it. You love people deeply but release them freely. You engage with possessions but do not let them possess you. You enjoy experiences, but do not let them define you. The Spirit leads you to live fully yet lightly, grounded yet free. Detachment is not withdrawal, it is wisdom. It is the realization that nothing external determines your internal state. Living by the Spirit also means walking in purpose. The flesh chases ambition, the Spirit follows calling. Ambition is about self-glory, calling is about service. When you live by the Spirit, your work ceases to be about gain and becomes about giving. You begin to ask not, "What do I want from the world?" but "What does God want through me?" Purpose is not something you invent. It is something you uncover as you align with truth. The Spirit uses your talents not for applause, but for impact, not for validation, but for transformation. As you walk deeper into this life, you begin to experience the quiet joy that comes from inner coherence, when your thoughts, words, and actions align with divine truth. You no longer live divided, torn between who you are and who you pretend to be. The Spirit restores your integrity, the wholeness that makes peace possible. You find that peace is not something you achieve. It is something that returns once you stop resisting. The Spirit also renews your mind. It transforms how you think, not by adding new beliefs, but by removing false ones. It replaces anxiety with trust, judgment with mercy, and confusion with clarity. The more your mind aligns with truth, the more your outer world reflects it. The Spirit does not change circumstances to make you happy. It changes you, so circumstances lose their power to define your happiness. Living by the Spirit brings a sacred stillness, even in motion. You can be surrounded by noise, yet remain centered, pressured, yet unshaken, misunderstood, yet undisturbed. This stillness is not apathy, it is awareness. You begin to see the world as a stage where divine lessons unfold. You no longer get lost in the drama because you understand the story. The Spirit turns life from a battlefield into a classroom. To live by the Spirit is to return home, to the truth of who you are before the world taught you fear. It is to remember that you are not a body with a soul, but a soul expressing itself through a body. When you live from this awareness, you stop chasing completion because you realize you were never broken. You stop begging for love because you realize you are love. You stop searching for God outside because you discover His presence within. This path does not exempt you from pain, but it gives meaning to it. It does not erase difficulty, but it fills it with light. When the flesh lies and the Spirit reveals, you begin to live with eyes open to eternity. You walk through fire, yet remain untouched, for truth becomes your armor. You speak less, but feel more. You strive less, but accomplish more. You fear less, but love deeper. The Spirit reveals that peace is not the end of the journey, it is the way. Every step taken in truth is already peace. You do not have to wait for heaven to experience it. It lives within every surrendered moment. When you live by the Spirit, you begin to experience heaven not as a place, but as a state of being, an inner harmony with the divine will. The world outside may crumble, but the world within remains unshaken. This is the victory of the Spirit over the flesh, the transformation of perception that turns every burden into a blessing, every trial into testimony, every wound into wisdom. It is not an escape from reality, but the full embrace of it, illuminated by truth. The Spirit teaches you to walk through darkness with light in your heart, to endure storms with faith in your soul, to love even when it hurts, and to trust even when you cannot see. When you reach this place, life no longer feels fragmented. Every moment becomes sacred. Every breath becomes prayer. You understand that the same Spirit that guides you also sustains you. You no longer fear what lies ahead, because the one who walks by the Spirit knows that every step, even in uncertainty, leads home. And so, as this journey through the lies of the flesh and the revelations of the Spirit draws to a close, remember this truth. You were never meant to live in confusion or bondage. You were created to live in truth, peace, and divine clarity. The Spirit does not just reveal what is wrong, it awakens what is right within you. It calls you to live not by sight, not by fear, not by the noise of the world, but by the eternal whisper of God within your soul. If these words have stirred something deep in you, if your spirit feels the call to walk in truth and peace, take a moment now to subscribe to the channel. Continue with us as we explore the living wisdom of the Spirit, where illusion ends, truth begins, and peace becomes the rhythm of your life.